Robin Cass is an award-winning Canadian film producer whose work includes Lily's, High Life, Emotional Arithmetic, and Down the Road Again. We caught up with Robin at his office in Toronto. Hi, Robin.
Robin.
Could you provide a quick history on how you came to be a movie producer?
After working in the visual arts field, and I was a conceptual artist and sculptor and did installation work, I got a little fatigued with the world, the environment of the high art world, as you call it, and decided that I needed to find something else to do. And during my time at art school, I didn't have a TV, and I lived beside a review cinema, Cinema Lumiere on College Street in Toronto. And if I had an evening, I would just go to the box office, put down my $3, walk in and watch whatever happened to be playing. And I fell in love with Italian cinema, wasn't a fan of French cinema, I liked the German somewhat, and it was all foreign language. And I discovered a whole world of language, communication, storytelling, craft that I just adored. And in deciding that I didn't really want to spend my life working alone in a studio making sculpture or whatever, that I was a bit more of a people person, and I liked the idea of working on a collaborative team.
How does a Canadian producer create a product that can compete at the box office with the plethora of product that's coming from south of the border?
How do you compete with stuff from the US? I think you have to be bold, you got to be good, and I think you have to have a real strategic plan. We've seen massive successes like the Blair Witch Project come from the US. They're made for a very small amount of money. We've seen massive movies recently that cost gajillions of dollars that haven't worked. There aren't any real formulas, but I think the real trick is to find a way to pick the creative material that's got a bold quality to it, something that sets it apart from the market. And then it's a question of, is the director a star? Are the actors the star? What is the sort of marquee part of the package that is going to help the marketing plan that's going to drive audiences?
I see. Could you briefly, if possible, take us through the funding process of getting a picture made in Canada?
In order to finance a movie in Canada, which is actually easier than some other countries in the world, I know we all compete mightily for the dollars that are available, but in fact we have a lot of opportunity here. So it's what we do isn't easy anywhere. But basically, the process starts at the script stage, and we go out once we either option a novel or a play that we're going to adapt, or we find a script at a stage that we fall in love with, then we option that property. Then we set about to raise money for the screenwriter to do the work. And to deliver a really good screenplay usually takes several years. So there are a number of steps involved there. Once you've got a script that you think is ready to package, you then raise more money so that you can start casting, interviewing, DOPs, designers, the various people involved, and you start to literally put the package together. At that stage, what you're also doing is garnering interest from financiers. You might bring on a world sales agent who will ideally pay you in advance for the rights to that movie to represent it worldwide. That goes into your financing. That's a key piece because that makes the financiers at home feel good about their investment, because obviously the thing has some perceived value in the market. Then it becomes your job to deliver the movie that's going to deliver on expectation, hopefully hit with audiences, and bear out everything I just said about how do you compete with anything from the US. So ideally, you have a great experience on set and in post-production, and you deliver a really engaging, solidly made movie that fulfills its own expectations. Expectations can be very different from one movie to another. But I think if you are clear what the expectations are from the get-go, and you stay focused and deliver on that promise and exceed, ideally, then that's kind of the best starting position you can have. And typically, you have anywhere from 4 to 8 financing partners. You might pre-sell to television. You might partner with another province in the country to bring some money to the table. You might do an international co-production and you might have a couple of provinces and an international partner. There's all sorts of ways that you can put these things together. That's all driven by the kind of story it is, what the creative is behind it, and which of the treaties internationally you might employ if you're going to go that route. So it's all a great chicken and egg kind of thing, and you kind of, as the producer, you kind of sort of bring everybody forward. You with me? You with me? Okay, come back here. You come back here, and you land them all at the same time in time to get the cast and crew to set and shoot.
Quite a process. If you could travel back in time to a point when you were, say, like 18 or 19, and
that's a long way back in time.
And knowing what you know now, what advice would you give yourself?
Like stop? How does never sound? You know what? I would give if I had to put myself in my 19-year-old shoes again and give myself a piece of advice, I think it would be the same advice that I still operate with, which is trust your gut. Because honestly, you can't really teach anybody how to produce. There are certain aspects of the business that you can go to school, get a law degree, all of that. I come to this from conceptual art. So I have my own particular kind of, I think of movies as sculptures. And I think of screenplays in rhythmic terms, because I also have a bit of a music background. And so I look at it from a somewhat personal and abstract point of view, and there are just certain kind of ways that I understand the overall package of a script. And I've always trusted my gut, because I don't have any formal training whatsoever. But I think I'm smart when it comes to listening to what you're getting from the script and having a decent sense of how it's going to play.
What advice would you have for someone who is just starting out as a producer these days?
How does never sound? No.
How does just don't?
I think that anybody starting out in this business, you got to know that it's not an easy road to hoe. No matter whether you're writing, producing, directing, acting, you want to be a DP, designer, whatever. All of it's hard. All of it's incredibly competitive because you're up against phenomenal talent, both nationally and internationally. And I think that the best thing you can do is really understand why it is you want to do this and have a really clear answer for yourself, because you're going to have to hold on to that in the dark days when you get turned down for this money or so-and-so says no to that. And you got to go, okay, why did I want to do this again? And you really got to know yourself in terms of where that motivation and that passion comes from, because it's really, at the end of the day, it's all about passion.
What spurs you on to take on a new project? Like, do you just go through screenplays that are submitted to you or that you find out there? Or are you actively hunting down projects you've heard about?
One of the most important things I think a producer and a production company do are to build the development slate, because that is your currency. That's what's on the shelf in the store. And if you don't have cool stuff on the shelf in the store, then the store is going to close. So you've got to really, I think, articulate what kind of story it is you're running. And I think you have to really have a clear sense of who your who your client base is and what you can work with. There's one thing to fall in love with a script that you just are so captivated by it. But if you can't answer the question, okay, yes, I love it, how can I make it happen? And if you can't have a clear path to the screen that you can see, there's no point in being passionate about it, because you got to be able to work with it and live with it for a long time, because most movies take 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years. And you got to really be willing to sweat buckets of blood for them. In finding new scripts, sometimes we option a novel. Right now there's a book called The Outlander by Jill Adamson, which is a really very, very successful Canadian novel. Successful here and internationally. It's a female-driven Western set in 1903 in the Rockies. And we just love the book. But we could very easily articulate where we're going to find a co-producing partner. We have one in the UK. Where we think we're going to, find a director. We're interviewing a couple of people right now. So that was a clear one. That was a no-brainer in the sense that we love the book. It's a great story. We knew how we could make it happen. That isn't always the case. Sometimes people give us a treatment. We read one this morning and had a meeting with a young filmmaker. We're like completely blown away by it, and we've signed her up. We've agreed to figure out a way to work together. So there's all sorts of manner.
I see. What do you look for in a director when it comes down to that point? And do you have directors that you prefer and sort of favorites that you go to, or?
When I'm sitting down with a director, the feeling that I want to come away with. Now, I should preface this by saying most of the directors I've worked with as a producer have either written or been heavily involved in delivering the screenplay. So before they take off the writer hat and put on the director hat, because they're very different mindsets, I have a very clear sense of confidence in their judgment, their willingness to listen and engage in a creative partnership, because I can only function as a good producer if I have a healthy creative partnership. Because if I'm not on board with you with all the creative, I can't fight for the right things financially to protect those things. So to me, it's a very symbiotic relationship. But at the end of the day, the directors I love the most have a great sense of character, and they help their actors deliver fantastic performances. To me, that's the most important thing a director does.
What advice would you give to a screenwriter, a new screenwriter or an up-and-coming screenwriter who was trying to get her piece made into a film?
Well, I think for anybody who's starting out in the business and who wants to be a filmmaker, and I would include writers, producers, directors. We're all sort of filmmakers in our own way. What worked for me, and I think it's really great to find your peers, because if nobody knows you from Adam, I mean, you might get your script read and get really lucky, or you might enter a competition and get really lucky. But instead of waiting around for, Lady Luck to show up and knock on your door, I would say find the other kids at college or in your community. Is there a film collective? There was one here in Toronto that's existed for years where Adam McGowan and Patricia Rozema, lots of people, Jeremy Podeswa, called Lift, and they all joined and they all crewed each other's short films, and they created a community, and they helped each other create their early works. And at a point you move beyond that and stand on your own. But this is essentially a collaborative art form. Nobody works alone, and I think you really have to find the peers that are going to support you and help you move forward, and that you can do the same thing for. So I'd say go find a really cool young director you like and get them to read your script and partner and decide you're going to make this together. Because then the two aren't waiting around for the world to notice you. You're creating an opportunity for yourselves so that the world will notice you.
What is the most rewarding experience you've had being a producer?
Besides sitting here talking to you.
Yes.
Of course. Let's state the obvious. Let's see, the most rewarding experience I've had as a producer. It might, well, you know what? I'm very fortunate in that lots of things come to mind, because I have had the good fortune of working with some astonishing people and seeing some really smart people at play, including some very well-known actors who we all know. And there's a real thrill at standing on the edge of set and watching a master work, and to know that you have been an integral part of the whole process that gotten everybody to this place to make the film. But I think on a really personal note, there are two actors in Canada who I essentially had a hand in them getting their first starring roles. One case, it was a young woman who had never been in front of a camera before in her life, and she was working with some real pros, and part of me has always thought she kind of stole the show, because I knew that about her. And it's an amazing sense of pride you feel like dad, well, the kid's doing okay. And then there was another actor on another movie who had not a lot of substantive camera experience, and he was co-lead on the movie and working with some real pros, and again he just blew everybody away. And it's amazing to watch people amaze themselves and you in the process, and know that you've actually altered someone's life because of an opportunity that you helped create. And I find that really exciting.
You once said that there's a body on every film. So,
Did I?
yeah. So, drawing on that, what's the worst experience you've ever had being a movie producer? Aside sitting here talking to me.
Of course. Having Bob shoot me, no. Give me one sec, because that's a really, that answer has to be, it can't be flip. Okay. We all have our fair share of incredible moments on movies, and we all have our fair share of really tough moments on movies. Hopefully the good ones outweigh the not so good ones. But I've been in situations where you're working with a person or a group of people, and try as you might, the alchemy that you need isn't there. And there might be friction, there might be disagreement, what have you, all sorts of factors contribute. But because developing an idea, because producing is ephemeral that way, you're kind of reeling in ideas from the ether and off pages and transposing them from one medium to another sometimes, or making it up as you all go along when you develop an original screenplay. And so you operate on such a strong sense of blind faith in yourself and in the people that you're building the house with, as it were. And you have enormous expectation because you have to completely convince yourself in order to raise the money that this thing is inherently so good and so valid and so interesting and so beautiful or so whatever. There is a point at which the gap between the dream and reality sets in, because at a point you have to make the thing, and you're standing in the rain on day 4 watching it pour, or someone's sick, or there's all measure of things that happen, or someone's misbehaving, which I haven't had a lot of that, happily. But there are moments when you go gulp. It was perfect in my mind. This is ruining everything. And your heart sinks, and you just think, I hope we can, get through and make this what it needs to be, and that when I'm delivering it to my investors, and we're saying, okay, here's the finished movie, guys, for the first time, you might have a novelist that you begged for the rights to their novel to be allowed to adapt it, or a playwright. You've got the financiers, you've got everybody who's believed in you. And you want to be able to stand there when the lights come up at the end and look at them in their eyes and know that they didn't regret it.
It's a tough one. What advice would you give to burgeoning producers to better enable them to sustain themselves financially on a full-time basis from making films?
Yeah, for a lot of years as a producer, I operated project to project. But the market's changed, the world has changed, and a lot's changed out there in that financing scene these days. And increasingly, everybody I know are operating with a more business-like foundation, because you've got to have a diversified slate. You've got to know where the projects that are more predictable, reliable, are going to come from, that are going to sort of give you that foundation cash flow that you need. So if that kind of security, as it were, is important to anybody in a business that's completely insecure by definition, you want to have a bit of a business plan whereby, I used to make corporate videos for Toyota and various government departments. That sustained me for a couple of years. You need your bread and butter. And so there are ways that one can plan on how that's going to sustain them so that they actually have the calm and the relaxed brain space to still make the films which are way less predictable. But some people don't care about that. Some do. It's individual.
Where do you think the most lucrative sales to be made for a Canadian producer are?
The most lucrative market is obviously the U.S. So if you're putting together a financing plan with your sales agent, ideally the budget is low enough, and it's a real kind of glass half empty, glass half full balancing act, because everybody wants all the money in the world to make their idea look the best it can be, with the biggest star they can find, with the greatest this they can get. But in the ideal world, if you want to protect the value of the U.S. market, you find a way you find that sort of sweet spot where this is enough money for this story, so you know where it fits in the market, and you can finance it with soft money, tax credits, pre-sales in Canada, maybe sell off one or two small territories in the world. That closes your financing, so when you premiere, with the hopes that it's going to be well received and a success, the big territory like the US or the UK for English speaking or whatever, those are available. And if you're lucky, you get a bidding war. So try not to sell the farm before you go to market, whatever that means.
Where do you see Canadian filmmaking heading in the coming years?
I think Canadian film, over the last 5 years, has undergone a real change, because I've been doing this for 20 years. And when I began in the business, it was a very auteur-driven world, and budgets were smaller. There was a real audience for independent film that went out to the cinemas to see the festival darlings and all of that. They're still there, but it's shrunk massively. People are watching things on the palm of their hand now. So why are they going to drive across town and spend $50 or $60 to see a movie when they can order it for free at home? And that's altered, forever. I think the content creator's relationship to the audience. And I think that, that reality, and obviously the fact that you can shoot a movie on a phone if you really want to, is a legitimate option, changes everything. And I think that, in the new generation of filmmakers I'm seeing, because I do a lot of outreach, all of us here at Union feel very strongly that one of the key elements in our success are going to be the next generation of filmmakers. And because they're going to be the bold, surprising, that's where the surprises are going to come from. And I see a very different sensibility in that generation at play than when I started out. And there is a slightly more commercial sense to just storytelling, period. And I think somehow people understand that the cineast auteur thing has changed. It's not the way it used to be, and I think they're less. I think they want to make something good as much as they want to be Canadian. And I'm not sure if that makes any sense, but there might be a bit of a shift in terms of what they would say their identity is as a content maker. First and foremost, it's got to be interesting and cool and good, and hey, it's great that I'm Canadian too, as opposed to hey, I want to be a really great Canadian filmmaker.
Shifting gears a bit, as a producer, do you think that Waterloo Region is a place that you might be interested in shooting one day, using it as a location?
Yeah, Southern Ontario. I mean, obviously, I've been to the Kitchener-Waterloo area. I presented a movie there last year at the film festival, and part of my family lives not too far, so I'm familiar with the area. And yeah, it's a great. It has actually already occurred to me as a location for a particular television limited miniseries that we're pitching. to have a place that has that variety of landscape and timeless vista within that proximity of a city like Toronto is invaluable, because it's an easy way to step back in time if you need to and if you want to.
What do you think Waterloo Region can do to better enable its filmmaking community?
If the Waterloo Region is a place that wants to foster growth in filmmaking and I assume the arts in general, I think what you're doing with this project is obviously a good idea, because it gives people a discussion point. Questions that need to get asked. People that apparently have an opinion might pipe in and say something helpful. But I think what it does is it actually formalizes a conversation for everyone who's interested to have, that becomes available by whatever means that you guys are going to put this out, and that will start something. When you light a match, something will happen, and so I think that grassroots kind of dissemination of information and opportunity for conversation and hopefully some thought-provoking information will spur something, because there is a creative community there, and creative communities by definition don't go quietly into the night.
The region has also been called the Silicon Valley of Canada. How has modern technology made an impact on your professional work as a producer?
Well, if I can sort of dovetail back to the prior question now that you remind me of the Silicon Valley analogy of the region, it seems to me...
Shoot a movie on a phone.
There we go.
Yeah.
But it seems to me there's a really perfect fit locally in both those communities to partner, because one has hardware and vast amounts of money. The other has intellectual property and creative assets. Neither functions without the other, so there's a marriage waiting to happen. And if I were working there, I'd be brokering that deal in a heartbeat. But obviously technology has made a massive change in storytelling, because it's given that opportunity to everybody. I mean, how many people have made things that they posted on YouTube that have gone viral? People have become stars and millionaires and created great opportunity for themselves because they are happy to relate to the democratic process. That's why I see a shift in the thinking of young filmmakers, because the idea of communities is at once strengthened and less material, because the idea of borders and limits fall away, because any community can post something and do something on a micro budget or no budget and legitimately have the opportunity to get as much attention as the most incredible hit on YouTube. So I think that actually is probably quite liberating for a kid in high school. I mean, I have a niece who's 11 years old who's made 3 short films. She shoots them on her phone. She edits them on her iPad. That is an exciting and terrifying thought all at once. That was not even a concept when I was that age. But if that's where she's starting at 11, one can only imagine where it goes from there.
What people or person has had the biggest influence on your career?
Don't know if I could put it down to one in terms of a lightning bolt of a personality who has, had that kind of a huge impact, but in knowing the biographies of lots of artists from various disciplines through the centuries, I've always been aware that great ideas and material come from the most obscure and surprising places. And I've always relied on that bit of knowledge, that I've given myself the same permission in my life, that if I can dream it and I can imagine it, and I have a certain amount of talent, no reason I can't do it. I mean, the money has to go somewhere. If I'm good enough, if I'm as clever as I sometimes think I am, then I should be able to inspire people to join in. And I think you really just have to let yourself not be shy.
What does the future hold for Robin Cass, and what's next, and where do you see yourself 10, 15 years down the road?
These days, I mean, I've spent 20 years making a string of more or less, art house films, several of which are very well known and, happy to say, quite highly regarded. And I've been very fortunate to have had a certain level of recognition for the work that I've done, and I'm still here doing it. But what I'm really excited about these days are some of the stuff that we're doing in terms of online strategy and aggregating communities because of the online thing and building on that. And also the international partnerships that we're enjoying. Canada is a really great partner for the international producing community. And because I've been around for a period, I know you get to know people, and we've got some great partnerships going on, and we're moving in a direction whereby we're moving out of smaller budgeted stuff into larger budgeted stuff. Partly it's an economic decision, but partly there's a point at which you want to have those other very different experiences than some of the smaller art films, all of which I will always continue to make and support. But it's a mixed menu now, more than it's been in the past. So I'm going to pursue that very aggressively for the next few years, and we're also becoming a distributor. So we're now taking other people's work to market. The knowledge I'm gaining, watching that part of the business happen around me, is affecting how I work. It's making my work better. So it's becoming, I think, a more informed whole in terms of the point of view that I'm operating from, and I find that kind of refreshing, and very lucky that I can say that after 2 decades of doing what I've been doing. It feels new again.
What's your favorite film, if you can name one?
I was afraid you might ask what my favorite film was, and I don't have one, but films I have loved by Robin Cass. I really loved Rushmore. I really like a lot of the ones that we've made, but they don't count. Dersu Uzala by Akira Kurosawa is a personal favorite. Happy Together by Wong Kar-wai. The Piano. There's a very old Italian movie called A Special Day with Marcello Mastroianni and Sophia Loren. It's a very sweet, small, charming movie. I've always loved that film. Il Postino. I tend to like movies that have a lot of heart, and often they're about outsiders trying to find their way into the world, which could, I suppose, have some slight, reference to myself in it, in terms of why I like them. It cheers me up to watch them win.
Well, thank you very much, Robin. Robin Cass is an award-winning Canadian film producer, and we caught up with Robin at his office in Toronto. Thank you so much.